Okay, so we are recording. And Yang Gang, I am here with Pastor Stephen Browers, who is being very generous with his time and allowing me to ask him a few questions. He uploaded a My Yang story video, I think last week. And when I watched it, I was really touched by it because it was very genuine, it was very real. And I've said this in the past, but one of my favorite things about the Yang Gang is finding common ground with people who I thought I was so different from. And that's always something I've always believed, like humans are more alike than they are similar, but I don't feel like we've had, at least in my lifetime, a candidate who's been able to unite people like Andrew Yang. I would be curious to hear from you, Stephen, if you've had a similar experience.
Yes, thank you, Brooke, for inviting me on. And I definitely have had that experience. In fact, it was a real surprise to me that so many people watched the video. And I sort of set it out clearly at the beginning that I was aiming this at Christians, that I was a Christian, that I wasn't going to try to convert anyone. And I wanted to make sure that nobody, if they weren't a Christian, I didn't want to offend them by talking about scripture or anything, or make them feel like I was trying to force them into believing something. But I've been really amazed at how many positive comments I've gotten from people who are not Christians, who are or used to be and aren't anymore, and just how kind they are and to me, and how encouraging they've been. It's really been great. Every rally I've been to, I guess what it comes down to is we aren't focusing on what differences we have. We're all on the same team trying to get Andrew Yang elected.
Exactly.
So all those differences stop being a big deal.
Yeah, and I think that you can share, you can not share a same religious belief, but share a similar vision for the future. And I think that's where Andrew Yang comes into play. And so I know you uploaded your My Yang story, and for those of you who haven't seen it, I will link it below in the description. But just a brief overview, for the people who are watching, how did you first hear about Andrew Yang?
I like to watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I especially like to watch videos about health and nutrition and diet. And for a while, Joe Rogan's podcast had a lot of information about the ketogenic diet and nutrition, that kind of thing. And so I was watching a lot of his videos, and along the way, you know how it gives you other options to watch. And it, for some reason, like Bernie Sanders was showing up, and Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, and I might have even watched a little bit of Bernie or something. I don't think I watched the whole thing because I heard a lot of what he had to say already. So I tapped on Andrew Yang and started watching his, and I immediately recognized that I'd heard about him and the $1,000 a month thing, and I thought that was really stupid, but I just kept listening. and by the end, I mean, he just got me all wrapped up in it. And by the end of it, I was just like, wow, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And that's when I really started listening to every podcast I could find. There were like Ben Shapiro, and wasn't it Ben Rubin, I think?
Rubin,
and then like the H3 podcast got out. Those were the ones that I could see, but then I ran out. So then I had to go find his book. I needed to find everything I could. And it was just a few days after that where I found on Facebook, the public fan page or something. And I started to find out everything I could about him.
That's awesome.
But I should mention, I should mention that my dad says he told me about Andrew Yang 6 months before that, but I don't remember that.
So that's so interesting to me because I'm assuming obviously your dad is older. And so do you know how your dad heard about Andrew Yang? Because like, he's definitely an internet candidate. And so I think that's awesome that your dad was like, hey, I told you about this guy a long time ago and you didn't listen to me.
Yeah, I'd say my dad is a lot farther left than I am. just in general. And he told me about Bernie Sanders before I'd ever heard of Bernie Sanders last time. So maybe that's where maybe he just follows politics a lot more than I do. I'm busy. I have 4 kids. I have things to do, and he isn't nearly as busy as I am. So maybe you just heard about him that way. I'm not sure. He's just more connected to politics and into sort of off the wall ideas than I am.
Yeah, so you said like when you first heard about UBI, you thought it was the stupidest idea you had ever heard, which is such a similar story that other people share. You always hear in the Yang Gang, like, yeah, when I first heard about him, I was like, that's crazy, there's no way. So how long did it take you to transition from like thinking it was the stupidest idea that you had ever heard of to literally canvassing for Andrew Yang, going door to door for his campaign?
Well, how long was the Joe Rogan podcast?
I guess 2 hours.
Like an hour, 53 minutes. Yeah. So that's about how long it took me. I mean, I was really sold by the end of that podcast. I could not believe how wrong I had been. Maybe I'm just easily swayed. I don't know. But I didn't start canvassing right away because I listened and listened. And in my Yang story, I talked about, like, I care about politics, but I have not allowed myself to be involved in it very deeply because I'm a pastor, and it matters a lot more to me that I'm able to preach Jesus to my people rather than have that be have an obstacle in the way. And the problem is, if you start talking about supporting one candidate over another, that then they start thinking when you're talking about feeding the poor, now think you're talking about a democratic agenda. They forget that Jesus told us to take care of the poor.
Yeah, completely. And go ahead.
But by the time I started canvassing, I guess I've slowly been pushed a little further and further. Probably it took me about a month to post on Facebook to change my picture to be Yang 2020. And then after that, it took a little bit longer. I was able to phone bank, but then after that, it was probably another month until I started canvassing. I just started working more and more on finding ways I could talk to people. I was wearing the merch. At some point, my wife said, I don't know why you're so worried about what people think. Between the bumper stickers and the hat and putting it on Facebook, I mean, you might as well just go and tell people what they already know.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So you said canvassing, and you're in Iowa, correct?
Yep. Yeah, small town in Iowa.
Okay, so for those of you who are going to Yang Week in Iowa, I'm curious, when you knock on people's doors, what is your opening line? And like, have you had any success canvassing door to door? Like, I want to hear a cool story that you've had canvassing door to door. Not to put you on the spot.
Well, my opening line is probably different than what other people would do, because I live in a town of 800 people and everybody knows who I am. I've been here for 10 years. Everybody knows me. I'm either their pastor or I'm the pastor at the Lutheran Church, which is the largest church in our town. And so I go there, and I mean, just imagine, they think a pastor is coming, either their pastor or a pastor is showing up at their door. I don't know what they think. They might think maybe their family member's been hurt, or I don't know, or they did something to get in trouble. But I tell them, hi, I'm here with the Andrew Yang presidential campaign, and I'm here to ask you your opinions on the Democratic candidates and to tell you a little bit about Andrew Yang. But that's really just, I get their permission to talk to them. But then the first thing I do when I'm talking about Andrew Yang is and I may change this in the future, because after some conversations with people, I kind of want to change my opening line. But so far, I've just been saying he's the Asian guy that is offering $1,000 to every adult age 18 to death. And I said, I know. The first time I heard it, I thought it was horribly stupid, the worst idea I'd ever heard. But then I started thinking, what if our church or my church could give even one family in our town $1,000 a month for just a year? I said that would change that family's life. And when I realized that Andrew Yang was showing how our government could do that for everyone in America without increasing the federal debt, which was a big deal for me as well, I just thought, why wouldn't I do everything I could to make sure that that happened?
100%. And so, I think a lot of people that I've talked to, and it's been funny because when I ask people, would $1,000 a month make a difference in your life? And they said, yes, completely. I could pay my bills. I could pay off my car. They start naming off these very reasonable things that they would do with their own money. But then when you tell them everyone's going to get this $1,000 a month, they're like, wait, everyone? Like, well, I know I'm going to use it responsibly, but everyone else is going to waste it on drugs and alcohol and all this stuff. And I just find it very humorous of how little trust we have or I guess people have in everyone else, but they're so sure that they're going to make the right decision. So what do you really say to someone like that who's like, well, I don't want everyone getting it because they're not going to use it responsibly?
Those are really good. I have experienced that a lot. There's two main arguments, of course. The first is that how are people going to waste the money? They're poor. And I don't understand where that comes from, but it's common. And I always think back to this YouTube video I watched like 6 years ago. I forget who the author was or who the speaker was, but he says, poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of cash. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've heard of this before.
Yeah.
But just the idea that people who are poor are somehow worse stewards of their money is wrong. And I think back to a workshop I was attending here in Greenfield, Iowa. And this person was from South Carolina, I believe, or North Carolina. I know they're two completely different states. I don't remember which one it was. But she was saying, she was talking about the 10% in Adair County, that's where I live, who are in poverty. And she said, but I'm just going to talk about those in deep poverty, which is really generational poverty. And she was explaining about how the things people from the outside looking in think, I can't believe they're wasting their money. But she said, we just don't understand about how they are actually making really good choices, or at least reasonable choices with their money. Because when you don't have a lot, you've got to make every penny count. So for instance, she was saying how people look at a family of four where the mom, let's say it's a single mom, and she's got 2 or 3 jobs, and why do her kids have this huge big screen TV and the Xbox One and all these games? You say, if she's so poor, why do her kids have all the best stuff? And so she explained, if you're a single mom and you've got all these jobs, you just want to make sure your kids are safe. You want to make sure they're going to stay home, they're going to be home, and they're going to stay home, and they're going to not want to leave. And so you get them everything you can think of to make them stay there, because you can't afford a babysitter. And I thought, wow, that makes sense. The other thing that I'm judgmental just like everybody else is. I've brought food to people that I know are in deep poverty. And the two things that always just tick me off, honestly, is I see there's always cigarettes there, and there's a huge dog. And I have a little dog who costs me a lot of money. And I think if you would just not smoke all those cigarettes and have this big dog, you'd have more money. But she tried to explain this as well in a way that made sense to me, at least. She was saying that why do people smoke? I mean, I know you get addicted, who knows why you start, but a lot of people smoke because it's a stress reliever. And about the most stressful thing that could happen in your life is to be in deep poverty. So of course, it's not a great idea, but I don't smoke. I often will eat a lot of ice cream, chocolate brownie ice cream. That's not a great choice, but nobody judges me for it. This kind of thing, or I have like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. Not great choices maybe, but it's how I relieve stress, by watching these things with my wife. And also, this big dog, it's a safety thing, and it's also for companionship and a relationship. And this was one other thing I want to mention about this workshop. They interviewed this lady that had lots of kids, single mom, living in a trailer, walking like 2 or 3 miles to go work at Burger King and then back because her car was broken and she couldn't afford to get it repaired. And they asked her, what could we do to help you? What's the one thing you want? And she took a second. She said, a friend. She's like, people just don't want to talk to me. They see how I don't have enough money to buy nice clothes. She said, I just don't, they know I don't have any money, and who wants to hang out with me? Who wants to talk with me? I have nothing to offer them. And I thought about that, if you have a dog, at least they love you unconditionally, unlike most other people who are very judgmental. But so those are some things. The other group of people that tend to get judged for how they spend their money are rich people. Why should we give $1,000 a month to Bill Gates or Warren Buffett? And I guess for both these groups, for all people, I love how Andrew Yang talked about it. He said, it's their money. They can choose to do with it what they want. They're American citizens, and who are we to tell them what to do? And as a pastor, and I focus a lot on grace. That sounds just like grace. There's no strings attached. When you start adding things that you expect them to do with it, that $1,000 stops becoming very much fun. It starts getting to feel like a weight that I'd rather not have. It's a bad way of talking about it. I think being universal is really, really important.
Yeah, I absolutely love how you went through the different ways that people spend their money, and how to us it seems wasteful or it doesn't make sense, but to them, when you actually put yourselves in their shoes, it actually makes sense. And one thing that I commonly say is like, I'm 26 years old. I haven't been on this earth a very long time, but in those 26 years, I've made so many mistakes. And I think the one thing about this $1,000 a month is you get it every month. So if you waste it one month or you make a bad decision one month, you have the next month to make a smarter decision or a wiser decision. And I think Andrew Yang is like the one candidate that I feel really puts just his trust in people. He doesn't try to control the situations. Like, we compare a lot with like Bernie Sanders and his federal jobs guarantee or the $15 minimum wage. It's like he's putting like restrictions, barriers to entry per se on like how people should get money. Whereas Andrew Yang, he's just like, I trust that you will use it in a way that best suits you. And even with his, with the guy who was receiving it, who bought a guitar, like no other proposal could have gotten that man to like buy a guitar and also have time to do the shows that he's now doing and like doing something that he's passionate about, And so I think it's just a beautiful idea. And then also towards what you were saying, go ahead.
I feel like we are so, I have a lot of privilege. I can waste money. I can make mistakes, but I've got a safety net of my family. they could always, I mean, not that I have super rich family, but like if I needed the help, they'd be there. I have messed up so many times. But when you don't have a lot of money, when you're poor and all your friends are poor and you're coming from a generational poverty background, you don't have that. And so we are that much more judgmental towards them. I think that's a real problem. And just to go back to, I get really frustrated at Bernie when he's always yelling at millionaires and billionaires, because he forgets that they're just people. By the way, he's a millionaire. And
well, he
but
stopped saying millionaires, right?
they're just people. They're just making the best choices they can have. Yeah, yeah. But they're just people trying to make their best choices. And I guess I just feel like I don't know what they're going through. I don't know. Well, like last night or 2 nights ago at the debate, I liked how Andrew mentioned to Steyer, or said something about Steyer, like, I don't think we should put him down for using his money to fight climate control. Like, I agree. Some people might think that's a waste, but I feel like that's pretty cool. And I'm glad he has the money to spend in that way.
Yeah, and there was like a huge debate on Twitter about Bill Gates a couple weeks ago. And I don't know a ton about Bill Gates, but one thing that I did follow him and his wife doing was they almost like eradicated, was it polio? And now they're working on malaria. And it's like, you know, if you're a multi-billionaire,
Yeah.
you're trying to literally eradicate these diseases and these sicknesses that kill people every day. I mean, that's not, I don't know. It's you can't, like what Andrew Yang says, you can't knock on someone for being rich and using their money in a good way. I don't know how he uses all of his other money. I'm just saying in that particular instance, like that is a major world problem that he's been able to solve.
Definitely. And that's for me, our church helps people. Like we help them with emergency benevolence. And here's one thing. We used to give out gas cards, $25 to Casey's, which is this a gas station that's really famous from Iowa, and $25, and it's supposed to help them pay for their gas. And we trust them with it. But then we found out recently, there was some way we found out that they weren't, I guess Casey's allowed us to sort of see in an anonymous way what these gas cards were being spent on based on the numbers. We told them we had these numbers, gave them out, what were they spent on? And like 1/10 of the money was used on gas, which was really frustrating. And sort of the whole generalization of wasting the money, you know, they're using it on, you know, all kinds of things that, you know, some were good, some were bad. But I was thinking, why did they do that? You know, they said they needed gas, but they just all lying to me. But I thought, you know, if you don't have a lot of money and now you have $25 and there's no strings attached, you get what you want, you get what you can get with that money. But if you, like you mentioned, if you had $1,000 and you knew it was coming every month, now you can start making plans. You're not just buying what you want. You think, well, what do I need? I mean, if I know this is coming next month, I know I'm not just going to spend it all, you know, on what I want right now. I can make a plan. I don't understand why people don't want to help people in that way. Exactly.
And so in your video, you also mentioned that there was a time where you, was it on WIC, I believe?
Yep.
The welfare program. And you said that it was very restrictive. You're grateful for the help that it provided, but you know, how would you compare our current welfare system with something like a UBI?
Yeah, and I talked to my wife about this too, because she's a pretty private person, and I was like, is it okay that I'm talking about this? But she agreed that it was okay. With WIC, our first child, my only daughter, we got on WIC, and they would give us, I think it was milk and carrots and cheese and peanut butter also. Those were the things that we could get. But we didn't really eat carrots, and we certainly didn't need that much peanut butter either. And I remember thinking how frustrated I was that I had to buy this food because all of our friends said, well, just buy it, don't leave it there. Like, if you're getting free carrots, get free carrots and give them away or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seemed like a waste to buy these things that we weren't eating. And but the part that I really got frustrated about was because we were on WIC, and that was nice, but we had to go in. I think it was like, I feel like it was once a month. Maybe it wasn't that many times, but we had to go in and get our daughter weighed. And they had to sort of interview my wife, and they'd always have me step out to make sure probably that she wasn't experiencing domestic abuse. Is he hurting you, kind of thing, making me step out of the door. And that's fine, because I know women that are experiencing domestic abuse, and I think that's a good idea. But it was just feeling like we were so supervised. And we had a friend that was also on WIC, and her little boy, he was small. I mean, we have fat babies. They don't ever worry about them gaining weight. But my friend, her child was so little because they were both kind of small people. And then every time he'd get weighed, he wasn't gaining enough weight. And they were saying, are you feeding him? I mean, and she's like, yeah, I'm feeding him. I mean, it was just so, just made her feel so bad and so guilty. And I just didn't understand why. We didn't want to do that. I think we eventually stopped just because it was so miserable going to those interviews and getting her weighed all the time. We just said, you know what, we'll buy our own milk and eggs, or milk and cheese, whatever it was. But we were also on medical assistance in Minnesota. We were up there at the time. And that was a way to have health care, and that was really such a blessing. But I remember that as well, two big issues. One was I don't think I ever knew what the guidelines were, like what the requirements were. So like I had 3 to 4 jobs during seminary. I was working, so I worked at the information desk, and I worked on grounds crew and mowed lawns and water flowers and dig ditches, this kind of thing. And then I mowed like 4 to 8 lawns all the time. And then I was also doing pulpit supply, which means I wasn't a ordained pastor yet, but churches needed somebody to come over and preach on Sundays. So I got paid for that too. So whenever like I got a new place where I would mow lawns, I was like, oh, this is great. And then I'd be like, oh no, what if it's too much? What if we lose our medical insurance? And so that was so frustrating. And then the paperwork, about every 6 months, or maybe it was every 3 months, my wife at the time, I mean, I do all the paperwork now, but at the time she was doing it because she was a stay-at-home mom. And it was just like so hard, and trying to figure out all the income things and all the information again and again. You'd have to turn in the same thing, and if you didn't turn it in on time, you'd lose it. So it was really stressful, and you weren't sure if you made too much money this time, or if you should get another job because you might lose it. It was just a really stressful thing. And this morning I was double checking that it was okay that I talk about this, and she said, you know what you should say? She said, you should tell them that she never understood how a person could cheat the system, because between her having a bachelor's degree and being a teacher and me having 2 master's degrees, we could barely fill out the paperwork. We always needed to get help. It was hard.
Wow.
And we could never figure out how somebody cheated the system because we weren't smart enough to do that.
Wow, that is
Oh,
crazy.
and you wanted
Go ahead.
And you wanted me to say what the difference with UBI would be. No paperwork, no stigma. Suddenly, the homeless person is on the same level as the teacher, who's at the same level as the CEO, who's at the same level as the multi-billionaire. Everybody gets the same amount. And I've heard people criticize that it doesn't really get rid of income inequality, which I do believe is an issue. But the thing is, $1,000 to a billionaire, it doesn't really matter. It's a drop in the bucket. the $1,000 to someone who, to a single mom who's at poverty level, it's going to end up doubling her income. That makes for so much of a bigger difference. It's like you don't really care that the billionaire has all his billions of dollars, because now at least you have more. You stop being so jealous, I guess, is part of the deal.
Exactly. And with, a value added tax, those billionaires, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates,
Yeah.
and Mark Zuckerberg, they're going to be paying a lot more in taxes. So if we want to give them $1,000 a month, then that's okay. That's crazy. I actually didn't realize how, I don't know. I just feel like our welfare system is so bulky, and a lot of people that I engage with, whether it's on the internet or on Twitter, one of their criticisms of Andrew Yang is he wants to get rid of these welfare programs, and which isn't all the way true. He's giving people a choice, and there are some welfare programs that stack on top of UBI. But sometimes I get so confused. I'm like, why do you think people want to be on welfare? It's not that glamorous, and it's hard, and you have to spend hours doing paperwork, and you can only make a certain amount. And I said this one time, I was like, UBI is like a floor and welfare is a ceiling. And UBI completely flips the incentives. Whereas it's like for you, working 3 or 4 jobs, it's like you wouldn't have to worry about bringing in a little extra income, because it would just be on top of the UBI. And so it incentivizes you to actually work. Not that I think you could have worked any harder at that time, but it incentivizes people to either work harder, or in your case, it's like maybe you would have quit your 4th job to spend more time with your family, and as a society, we should encourage that. It's like, I don't know why people, I think Americans have this work obsessed mentality where it's like, you gotta work as hard as you can till the day you die. And it's like, what is life about? Is life just us working from sunrise to sunset? And it's like, that's one of not my biggest frustrations, but I wish people could realize his whole vision. It's like, we have to stop this tying our value to our work. This is not a sustainable way to look at ourselves. And we need to start delving into actually what makes us human, and encouraging those types of things, whether it's being a stay-home mom or stay-home dad, or volunteering, doing something you're passionate about, being caregivers. We should start rewarding that as a society.
Yes, definitely. I've thought about putting this on Facebook or Twitter, or talking about it in a video, but I have a feeling like people that support a different candidate, that are putting down UBI, saying all these things, you had mentioned you wish they saw the whole vision. I have a feeling they really haven't looked into Andrew Yang. And the reason I think I'm right is because I often, in the past at least, had not looked into their candidates. Once I knew I was going to vote for Andrew Yang, it's not like I went to look up everything I could about Elizabeth Warren or Pete Buttigieg or Joe Biden. I would say, oh, can you believe they did this, or whatever the news story was, and I would sort of judge them for the worst I heard. But it's not like I looked into them and could really give you a clear idea of their vision. So what I started doing is saying, if I'm going to criticize other people for not looking into Andrew Yang, I'd better have enough self-awareness to have looked into those candidates to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. And so now I feel a little more confident about that. So now, I guess I can criticize other people with a clear conscience. But it takes a little bit of courage to look into other people, because there's that fear, like, oh no, what if I read about Bernie Sanders and I really love him? What am I going to do then? I just donated all this money to Andrew Yang. Yeah, But I think it's worth it because I'd rather know the truth. Uh, I was trying this most recently with Pete Buttigieg, and I feel confident that I'm on the right side. But I mean, it does give you a little more compassion for people that support those candidates too. And I really believe it. I have an easier time talking to people now because I can say, oh yeah, I know about the Douglas plan, or yeah, on his website you can listen to. He doesn't have policies written out. He has videos where he explains the policies. That's what is on his website.
I love that. I've gone to a lot of the other candidates' website, and I have to say, like, Andrew Yang's is by far the most intricate, the most in-depth, and the best one in my opinion, because he has those videos. Like, sometimes when you're reading something, it can just be so dry, and you have to read it like 2 or 3 times to really understand it.
Yeah.
So I love how
Mm-hmm.
comprehensive it is, and I'm curious, like, have you learned anything about the other candidates that stood out to you, like with Pete Buttigieg or Elizabeth Warren, like good or bad?
Well, I'm trying to give a good example. I guess the one I've looked into most recently is Buttigieg, because I really wanted to understand how he was gaining so much popularity in Iowa. And I can't say I've figured it out because it just was just so shallow, I guess. The policies just weren't there. The things that I read were, our policy is morality, this kind of a thing. And, we're going to do the right thing. And I guess I wonder, what do you mean? Like, what morals are you talking about? What values then? I'd have to learn a lot more to make sure that I know what that means when it comes to policies. But I guess I think my hypothesis is that in Iowa, people, and this is probably true all over the country, people don't have a lot of time. And it's easier to hear a soundbite or to say, hey, this guy looks nice. This guy sounds nice. I'd feel good about voting for him. And then you don't really look into his policies. That's why I think they like him. And I feel like I can speak from a little bit of self-awareness because I remember being really excited when I lived in Minnesota for voting for Obama the first term. And I was excited about that. It was before I was a pastor. And I can honestly say I must have listened to the Yes We Can video on YouTube like 100 times, or the SNL thing. I don't know. I listened to that song and videos about him all the time, and I could not tell you a single policy that he stood for. I loved listening to him. Mm-hmm. I liked the feeling I got for voting for him, but I didn't know what he stood for. So then when he got into office, I wasn't nearly as happy. I mean, I always have respected him as a person. He didn't, he was a good family man. I feel like he was a good father, a good husband. I can respect him. But when it comes to policies, I truly didn't know what I was voting for. And I have a feeling a lot of Iowans, if they were honest, they don't know what they're voting for either.
Yeah, I think that is a good assessment. And also, I also think Pete Buttigieg has spent a lot of money in Iowa. I think he has a really strong, couple of, what do you call them, like offices there. And so they've been doing a lot of work. And so I think for people, when they're just walking down the street or they're watching TV, they're just seeing so much Pete Buttigieg that it's kind of maybe like an easy choice for them. And so that's my theory. I've had a hard time figuring it out too, because I've gone to his website and I'm like, what is it about this guy? But I want.
And I sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I know we have a delay. Yeah. But I get frustrated when I see the polls that say people are most interested in someone who can beat Donald Trump.
Yes.
And then I see who they vote for, because I think you cannot truly understand what you're talking about, because there are some of these candidates that don't have a hope of beating Donald Trump. So if that's really the most important thing for you, I think I just think you don't understand, and that's the thing. I don't put them down or anything, but I mean, I just don't think they understand that if you want someone to beat Donald Trump, you need somebody that appeals to people who used to vote for Donald Trump, and to independents as well as to Democrats. And some of the nominees right now, for instance, Pete, I can't imagine how he could beat Donald Trump in a general election. Even though he's a great, nice person, I just don't see how he could win. Or like Elizabeth Warren is another one. Like, if you love her policies, go for it. Like, I'm not trying to put any of these people down, not the candidates or people voting for them, but make sure you know what you're saying. You're saying you love her policies. You're not saying you really think she's going to win. I don't think she can.
I completely agree. And like, I always like to just do this visualization and imagine like Pete Buttigieg toe to toe with Trump. And it's just like, oh, that would be a disaster. Or Elizabeth toe to toe with Trump. And it's like, and in the debates, I'm sure that you watched the last debate. Before they even started the debate, they talked for like 5 minutes about, I think the most important thing that people are looking for is someone who can build a broad coalition of people to vote. And they're describing Andrew Yang, and they're completely ignoring him on their network. And I'm like, guys, if you had any sense, you would see this guy, Andrew Yang, and how he's gone from nobody to literally hundreds of thousands, I don't know, maybe millions of people supporting him, who are made up of ex-Bernie supporters, ex-Trump supporters, people. He's resurrected this whole base that hasn't even been interested in politics for years, and libertarians and Republicans. And it's like, he's the guy. Like, if they had any sense, they would be totally playing up this dark horse, underdog story and pushing him up, which makes me believe that even though they say their number one goal is to beat Donald Trump, the networks, their goal is to keep the status quo. And Andrew Yang is another anti-establishment candidate who, and they don't really want to have to deal with an anti-establishment candidate back to back. And it's so funny to watch that and be like, you're literally describing Andrew Yang and not giving him any airtime.
I completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. And I don't understand. I try to keep a very positive attitude, though, with the media blackout and everything, because I remember it took me 6 months to to listen to what my dad told me. But even though once I heard about him, I was quickly Yang Gang.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, there was a question you asked earlier that I didn't answer, and it just popped into my head, and it's sort of what gives me hope. And you're asking, did I have any good stories from when I've been canvassing? And I have two that I'd like to share. One was, I was going and I was looking for this one guy who was a Democrat, and he was mowing the lawn. So I asked his wife, who was not on my list, but I said, are you going to vote? And she's like, yeah, I'm Republican. And I was like trying to talk to her. She knew I'm the pastor, right? So she was willing to listen to me, I guess. But we talked, and by the end of that, she's like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, I really want to learn about this guy. I said, well, if you went and caucused for him, you'd have to switch over to being a Democrat, but you can do that the night of in Iowa. And she's like, well, I might just do that. And then now he came around, and he wasn't nearly as open to it as she was, I must say, but I thought it was pretty cool that she was so interested. And sometimes you think that that you're not getting anywhere, or that you don't have hope with someone because they're a different party, but I feel like I have a better chance sometimes talking to independents and Republicans than I do Democrats, which can be frustrating, but also maybe hopeful. And the other one, I think I mentioned this on my Yang story, but there's one lady who goes to my church, and I talked to her. She was very kind and let me in to talk about it once she knew I was there with the Andrew Yang campaign and not just on a pastoral visit. But she said, I asked her three top ones, and she told me, and then she said, she's been following me on Facebook because I put so much on Facebook. And she's like, I would have never looked into Andrew Yang. I'm going to be honest. I'm not interested at all. But because I respect you, Pastor Browers, I'm looking into him. And I thought, yes, because it's so scary for me as a pastor to risk, I guess, creating an obstacle for people to faith in Jesus by talking about Andrew Yang. But I guess maybe I've been here long enough that they trust me. I've never talked about politics before. Maybe they believe me when I say that this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing for me. But I guess I'm glad that the last 10 years of taking care of people and loving them and being, just living with them, that maybe now they're willing to listen to a little bit of what I believe when it comes to politics.
Yeah, and I think that's something I've noticed, that people kind of turn their head a little bit when I post political stuff on my social media, because I've never been into politics either. So it's different when you have someone who's never really promoted someone in the past, because then people are like, oh, if they're talking about them, then like, what is it about this guy that got this person interested in politics, And so I think that's almost like a secret weapon, to say like, I've never been into politics before. I mean, you've been into politics, but you've never like been super open about it. So, and I think that is kind of a secret weapon that people can use when talking to people. I've had a lot of success, and it's the nice part about it is it's completely real and honest. It's just like, I really have never been into politics, and people know that. And so when I say that, it lands the way that I would like it to. So I know we're running out of time because I said around like an hour, but I wanted to ask you a couple more questions.
I have plenty of time.
Oh, okay, cool.
I have time. It's actually my day off. And so you don't have to, I'm not like taking off of work. I only do my Yang videos either over lunchtime or before I go to work or in the evening, because I try really hard not to ever get the time of when I would be working normally confused with the time that I'm focusing on Andrew Yang.
So your channel is all about kind of a Christian case for Andrew Yang, like how his vision aligns with some of these Christian values. And so if you were to kind of put together like the elevator pitch maybe for the Christian case for Andrew Yang, what would you say?
I would say that he walks the walk, he talks the talk, his whole demeanor, the way he treats other people, is a perfect example of how I would want a Christian president to act. His policies and his values just seem to be so full of Christian values. The only thing that people seem to normally focus on is, well, is he an actual, Christian? Like, he goes to church, but some people have asked, well, is he saved? Like, I don't know. I mean, like, I can't tell you what's in his heart. I know that there are people that come to church that probably don't care at all about Jesus. They're there with their wives or they're there with their husbands. They feel like they should be. And then there are people that never come to church that are big believers in Jesus Christ. So I'm not interested in telling you about whether I think he's going to heaven or not. I mean, that's not really what I'm all about. But I can tell you that when I hear his policies, I hear I hear like scripture coming out. Like I always hear like that just sounds like this, or his values that I've been talking about on my videos. I'm gonna put up the last one today. Uh, um, every one of his values, I hear so many. I wish I could think of the word. So many, not reflections, but I can hear these stories or these passages from the Bible just coming out. And I want a president I can respect. I want a president that I know will respect all people. And I guess that's my Christian case. I can be proud of him.
Yeah.
And even now, I'd really try not to talk about any hot button topics on my channel. I've questioned whether I ever should. But when it comes to some of the real difficult issues and policies, dividers, I'm on a group called Christians for Yang. It's a Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
And we all talk about, and I don't know if it's okay if I talk about anything is big issue that. Yeah. Okay. I'll try not to talk too much about it, but I would say that the vast majority of those people on this Facebook group are pro-life. Like, I would say, like, personally, I'm pro-life, very much so. But what matters more to me than a purity test or to feel self-righteous, like I'm pro-life and that's good for me, that's what God wants. Instead of that, like, I just want fewer abortions. How do I get fewer abortions? Well, 70% of people that get an abortion say it's because of financial insecurity. So, like, if we make abortion illegal in America, like marijuana is illegal in America, each state will decide whether they want it to be illegal or not. So it's not like it's not going to ever happen. It'll make us feel better. And I truly, I would be like, yeah, I feel better now that it's illegal. But the question is, are there going to be fewer abortions? And I don't think so. I mean, maybe there'll be the promise of punishment. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I want a woman punished because of the most difficult decision she's going to have to make. I don't think I want that. Yeah. I don't think Jesus would want that either. And so, like, if I'm pro-choice then, because I want to make it so there are fewer abortions. I want to make it so women actually have a choice, if that makes sense. Yes. That they have a choice to choose life. They'd have the money to say, I can take care of this baby, even if the daddy runs away from me, which many times happens. I can have the choice. If I want this baby, I can, or even, I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but a lot of Christians talk about adoption. We adopted our youngest son. Adoption costs a lot of money. It really does. If you want to have more people adopt, you got to give them some money. So the freedom dividend would not only, I believe, make it so that there'd be fewer abortions, there'd be more adoptions because people would actually have the money to do it. But of course, I know that people come from very different opinions, and I'm not putting anyone down. I truly can understand both sides. I don't think anyone is against life, and I don't think anyone is against choice.
Yeah, and I'm really actually glad that you brought this up, because this is one of those issues where no matter what you say, half of the country is going to disagree with you, right? And so in my personal view is like, I'm pro-choice, but I don't like abortion. Like, that's just me being honest. I'm not going to tell a woman that she, what to do with her body. But I don't like abortion. And I think in today's culture, it's like, I'm even afraid to say that sometimes, because I'm a woman and I, should be like 1,000% pro-choice and all of that stuff. But it's like, you have to look into the reasons, like you said, why women get abortions. And the reason why, a main reason is because when you're bringing a child into this world, I think the number one thing a woman wants to feel is security, whether that's financial security, whether that's security in her relationship. And if she's, I ask myself this too. It's like, if the women who have gotten abortion in the past, if they had $1,000 a month coming in, that they could rely on top of whatever else they're already making, would their decision have changed? I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming some would have chosen differently. And so we have to ask ourselves as a society, is it really pro-choice if a woman feels forced to make a decision that she doesn't want to because she feels like she has to for financial reasons? And that's where Andrew Yang completely elevates this conversation, because he's actually putting resources in women's hands, like you said, to make the choice that they want to make. And I think everyone can get on board with that. You know, I don't really see an argument for giving women more of a choice. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I truly feel that Andrew Yang is the best candidate for women. And he has so many policies that would help stay-home moms, single moms, people in really hard positions. Like, I wish there was a little more empathy from both sides, from pro-life and from pro-choice, because, you know, on the pro-life side, it's like, I don't know if they fully understand the actual positions that these women are in. You know, some of them are living like a living hell, and so they actually feel that they're doing the most compassionate thing. And for some people, it's like, that doesn't even make sense, but it's like, to put yourself in that position, you know, I don't know, like, it even kind of makes me emotional, because it's like, I wish there was a little more understanding on both sides. And Andrew Yang has the best solution for this by far, whether you are pro-choice or pro-life.
Yeah, and I always, well, I'm a guy, so honestly, my opinions, I can't really know what a woman goes through. So sometimes when people say, what do you think, Pastor Browers? I'm like, well, you know, I can give you my opinion, but understand, like, I don't really know what that would be like. Mm-hmm. I was reading this one article, because I just struggle with this, of course, because, like, I have my personal beliefs. Like, I mean, I wouldn't do that. I don't think. Who knows what weird situation I could be in. But I really think, I don't think I could ever have an abortion, or I couldn't. I'm a man, right? But my wife, I would never encourage her to have an abortion. But I was reading this one article, and there are so many nuances that people just don't understand. But there was this woman, she was saying, I never imagined getting an abortion. And people are saying, oh, have an adoption, give your child up for adoption. But she's like, I would have. The baby's 10 weeks old, but, like, I can't give my uterus up for adoption. Like, I still have to carry the baby for the next 30 weeks. Do you know what kind of a change that means for my entire life? Like, it's not just a simple, oh, sure, I want my baby to give it up for adoption. Like, it affects my work, it affects my family, it affects, you know, my income. I have to go to all these doctor's appointments. I mean, it affects how much food I eat. It affects the fact that I'm throwing up all the time. Like, when people just say, oh yeah, just give it up for adoption, they have no idea what a huge thing that is. And then they say, well, you know, you had sex. Like that's not, I mean, it's just like, it doesn't seem like the crime fits or the punishment fits the crime. If that, I mean, not that it's a punishment or a crime to have a baby, but it's like, when I talk to my high schoolers at youth group, we'll often talk about, you know, the issues, Christian issues, like premarital sex and this kind of thing. And they'll say, oh yeah, so-and-so got pregnant. And I'm like, you know, being pregnant isn't a sin. Like, that's not the problem. Like, Jesus, it's like, you know, there are lots of people having premarital sex. Only a few get pregnant. They're the ones that get ostracized. Yeah. That's not really fair. I feel like, and so it just sort of, when people are like, well, it was their choice to get pregnant, I don't know. It just doesn't,
It's a
it
very
just doesn't seem
shallow.
to make sense to me. And then,
Yeah, I mean, it's a very shallow way to look at the issue, in my opinion. And I love that you are willing to really understand, like put yourself in the like a woman's shoes, because I've heard that argument too, like you know, just put it up for adoption and everything. And so by you even willing, you know, coming from like a pro-life standpoint for you, even willing to put yourself in that person's shoes and really understand and kind of see the nuance, I think is like really commendable. I hope that more people can just at least understand. You don't have to agree, but at least try to understand.
yeah. And, you know, I most often deal with these questions as a pastor when somebody, usually they'll come to me years later and they say, you know, I had an abortion. And it's like, you know, you can just tell that, and they're not always, you know, it's not that they're going back and say, I necessarily wish I'd done it differently even, but they just have so much guilt. And, and maybe they still would have done the same thing, but they feel that societal guilt, from everyone. And I know that that's where a lot of pro-life people also say, you know, it's hard on women, we shouldn't let them do this. But I feel like Christians in general really need to be more compassionate, because when we're constantly making women feel horrible for having to, I mean, they have to make the choice, it's really up to them. When we make them feel so horrible for making such a difficult choice, we do not, I think, present the grace and the forgiveness and the love of Jesus Christ in maybe the way I would like us to. I would like us to be more caring and compassionate and forgiving and loving.
Yeah, and understanding, and
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And that's where Andrew Yang can bring us together. You know, I've noticed with a lot of
Yep.
a lot of his policies, it's like, for me at least, I always thought it was like, okay, it has to be this way or this way. And then Andrew Yang comes and he always kind of brings in this third option where it's like, oh, it's a lot more sense. I didn't even know that that was a possibility. And I think that was showcased in the debate as well, with him mentioning, you know, we need to create an environment where our boys are healthy and they're strong and they feel like they have a path forward. You don't really hear a lot of presidential
Mm-hmm.
candidates saying something like that. So you watch the debates, right? Like,
Yeah.
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 What's your overall reaction to them? I'm just curious.
Well, I must say I didn't watch the debates live.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't watch it live because it was a Wednesday night, and a lot of Christians know Wednesday night is like church night, and so I'm like super busy Wednesday nights. But I ended up watching it over a period of time, and of course I was frustrated that Andrew doesn't speak. I always want him to jump in more and all that kind of stuff. But every time he talks, I learn something. Every time he talks, my mind is blown. Like, how did he surprise me again with this answer? Like, I know where he stands on everything, but he just has a way of talking that, like he says, it's human. He laughs. He always treats other candidates with respect. I love that I'm following him. I love that I support him. He always makes me proud.
Was there a specific moment, like your favorite moment of the debate, that stood out to you?
Definitely, because I've probably heard, I mean, it's the same speech that he gave in Iowa, his closing statement, uh,
Yeah.
because I have heard it so many times, but I love it whenever he brings up the fact that he's a parent. And that's actually one of the things that I think I'm going to focus a lot more on when I go out canvassing, is him being a parent. Because when he says, you know, I saw the country I'm leaving for my kids, and it wasn't something I was willing to accept. I mean, I get shivers. I'm shivering right now again. it means so much to me because like that's how I feel. And I totally get behind that. Maybe because I'm a dad and he's a dad, and I have a special needs kid and he has a special needs kid. But I mean, I have these connections in that way. But I feel like I'm so blown away and so happy that even though he only spoke for 6 minutes out of 2 hours, that people recognize that everything he says hits, everything he says matters, and they're actually giving him a lot of good press for that, which is awesome. I mean, I've gotten so frustrated in past debates. I'm like, why doesn't he say more? But, you know, he says what he needs to, and he doesn't just keep blabbering on and on and on. I mean, I tend to blabber on and on, so I know the feeling. I wish I could be more like Andrew and just say what I mean and get it done.
Yeah, that I think that was my favorite moment too, because I mean, you and I, we've probably listened to just hours and hours of Andrew Yang. So we heard everything in that closing statement, but it was like he took bits and pieces of some of his best lines and just put them together. And people have to keep in mind, because I know the Yang Gang was like, we've already heard this. Like he said that a million times, but I'm like, but other people haven't. That's the thing. People are just starting to tune in. And when they hear something like that for the first time, it makes a huge impact. And that was my favorite moment too. I also loved, for some reason, like I wasn't expecting to really like this moment, but it caught me off guard when he turned to Steyer and was like, you know, you can't knock someone for having money and using it in the right way. And I don't know, it was just a very human moment. I love how Steyer reacted, how he was just like, thanks, Andrew. And so,
well,
go ahead.
And there is one other moment. It's not on, like if you looked up everything Andrew Yang said, it won't show up. But it was one of my favorite moments.
I know what you're going to say.
It's just, it makes me laugh. It's when they asked Bernie about, now, how do you feel when that your supporters were saying about Trump to lock him up? and Andrew Yang is just laughing on the side, like, what a stupid question. Like, what else is he supposed to say?
Yeah.
I mean, he just started laughing. I know his laugh. It's so clearly his laugh. But he was like, I cannot believe you're asking this stupid question.
They totally, apparently, they just cut that out so no one else could see it. I hope someone has the footage of it. I guess if you recorded the debate, then you can watch and see it. But yeah, Andrew was just like, what the heck are these questions? And I was totally feeling the same way. I was like, oh my gosh. But you know, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I feel like I learned a lot about you and more kind of your background and just who you are as a person. And I'm so happy that you're in the Yang Gang. So this will be my last question is, Iowa is very important. And so what can the Yang Gang do from your experience, since you have on the ground experience in Iowa, what can the Yang Gang do to help Andrew Yang pull higher in Iowa?
It's a really good question. I mean, first, I'm a Christian, so I'd say for all the Christians, you need to pray a lot. But then we pray like it all depends on God, and we work like it all depends on us. That's the next part.
That.
I really need for people to, I love Twitter. I do. I joined because of Andrew Yang, but I love Twitter. I really enjoy Facebook, and I love watching YouTube videos, but we just need to canvas and text bank and do phone calls. But I think especially if anyone can do Yang Week, just talking to people one-on-one, especially in the small towns, because we don't have a lot of people coming out here. I think that could make a difference. I don't know for sure if it's going to. I can't promise that. But when you go and you shake someone's hand and you tell them why Andrew Yang matters to you, especially since a lot of them haven't even heard of him still, it's just, they'll remember. even when people tell me they don't care, they're not going to vote for him, no way, I still think, yeah, but at least you heard me. You had to listen to me. You'll remember that I stopped by your house, your pastor or this pastor in town stopped by your house, and I told you how much this mattered to me. So, maybe their candidate will drop out along the way, or something else might happen, and they'll need a second choice or a third choice, who knows.
Mm-hmm.
But I want them to understand that he's an option. And I think but what if you can't? I guess the other thing I would encourage is, if you're just donating, which I think is really important too, I know that there's like a Humanity Forward fund that if you donate through their Act Blue, that they'll match it to help with Yang Week.
Yes.
In Iowa, I think it's Humanity Forward Fund.
Yes,
I haven't done it yet personally, but I'm pretty sure. Okay. And then I guess one more thought. I've been talking with somebody about how we can do a better job of talking to Iowans, and one is by focusing on his humanness, being a parent. But the other one was, like, I've been focusing a lot on $1,000 a month, and what that could do for the poor, and what that could do for everyone. But I was talking to this guy on Facebook, and we both agreed that a lot of the people we're talking to, the registered Democrats, they don't really actually need $1,000 a month. I mean, they're doing okay, if that makes any sense. Not that they couldn't use it, but it's not going to necessarily change their lives a whole bunch. So maybe it's not enough. But in my small towns, the small towns I live by, we can't keep businesses open. I mean, since I've been here, we had Pomaida, and then it closed. And then we had True Value, and then it closed. And we had a Pizza Hut, and then it closed. And then we had a couple different cafes on Main Street, and then they closed. Because there's not enough money to keep a small business going. And honestly, we don't have the money to spend there. But if you're talking about in Greenfield, Iowa, I think it is that I was figuring it out, it would add like $40 million every year to the local economy. And kids, instead of moving away to somewhere else to find a job, maybe they would stay. I mean, maybe we could actually get businesses going again in our small towns, because we have this money to spend and to start businesses, because that is a fear that all these small towns have, that we're going to slowly fade away and just become another suburb of the next largest city near us. So I feel like that might be a better way of talking about the $1,000 a month, about talking about our local economy and what that would mean, and about keeping kids here and starting jobs here. So.
Yeah, and so Paget Kagi had KG or Kagi. She did a YouTube.
I think it's Kagi.
Yeah, she did a YouTube video, and I'm gonna have to put the link in the description. It basically was like, this is like a no-fail 2-minute speech for people who are living in a small town, and it's almost exactly what you were saying, like talking about small businesses and how they're not doing well in our towns, and what $1,000 a month in everyone's hands would mean to our economy. And so I will link that below, because I remember listening to it while I was driving, so I wasn't really paying a lot of attention. But when you were talking, it sparked that memory. And so I'm going to link it below so you guys can look at it and read it and tweak it so it fits you and your personality. But thank you again so much for coming on and doing this. Is there anything else that you want to say or tell the Yang Gang?
I'm very grateful for having the chance to talk to you. I know when I first made the video, I'd been thinking about it for a really, really long time. And I think I just posted it to the Christians for Yang Facebook page. There are like 200 people on there. I just thought, I made this, what do you think? And then I was taking my son with the special needs to Iowa City, because he had to have a video EEG because he has seizures. So anyway, so I was driving all morning. I left at like 3 in the morning, and I think I uploaded it at midnight or something like that by the time I got uploaded. So I was driving, I was busy with these doctor's appointments, and I finally sat there. And then this one person that works with the Andrew Yang campaign, who helps me with canvassing out of Des Moines, his name is Max, he texted me, and it's like, you're on the front page of Reddit.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, what? And so then I looked at the channel and there were like within 24 hours, it was like 1,000 views, which for me was just like, wow, I can't believe that many people even watched this. It was nice. I mean, my kids were making a big deal of it, and I was like, yeah, it's my 5 seconds of fame. It was just funny. But it really made me feel good. Like, you're famous, Daddy. It's like, it makes you feel good. And it was really nice to know that lots of people were inspired by it. And like I said, Christians and non-Christians, I feel like maybe I'm able to encourage people not just to see that are Christians, to maybe see how Andrew Yang is a possibility, because people are sending it to their family members who don't support Andrew Yang yet, who might be Republican or conservative. And I think, oh, maybe that could help. But also, since I'm a pastor, it does make me happy that maybe I'm being a good witness to Jesus. People say, I've been to church for a long time, but you make me want to go back. And I think, well, that's good. I mean, I'm not trying to convert anybody, but it does make me happy that at least I'm able to give people a nice Christian to know. Because it seems like a lot of people have met a lot of not nice Christians, and that's not great. So I'm just grateful for the chance to talk about Andrew Yang and to share my faith too. And there's so many policies we could talk about. I could talk about Andrew Yang all day, but it's probably you got to leave me something to talk about in my future videos.
Yeah, we'll be watching your future videos. So thank you so much again. Have a wonderful day and see ya, Yang Gang. So I'm gonna go ahead.
Thank you.